Welcome to Let's Get Curious, the podcast for women and mothers seeking connection, support, and inspiration. We are friends, mothers, and therapists. Lori, a physical therapist, and Dorothy, a speech and language therapist. Together, we share our personal stories, including IVF, birth experiences, and navigating children's learning difficulties. Through our discussions, we uncover profound lessons for personal growth. Join us on this journey of curiosity, compassion, and empowerment. Welcome to Let's Get Curious. I am lucky to have Josh and Jeannie from, on Instagram, they're known as RealFoodGangstas, and online they are known as East West Healing. And they are a husband and wife duo who both have a love and understanding for the wholeness of the human body. Josh holds a bachelor's in occupational therapy. He has studied traditional Chinese medicine and is also a certified Czech practitioner and holistic lifestyle coach. Jeannie is a certified clinical nutritionist, Czech practitioner, and is a skilled biodynamic craniosacral therapist. Together, Josh and Jeannie have over 20 years of research and experience and are pioneers in restoring thyroid and metabolic health. They are the creators of the RTN method, restorative thyroid nutrition. In this method, they teach how to use food as medicine, how to heal chronic states of inflammation, and reduce internal and external stresses through awareness so that the body can heal, restore, and reach optimal thyroid health. Welcome, Josh and Jeannie. So I would love, yes, thank you for being here. So I would love for you two to just explain a bit how you both got on this path.
For sure. It's a long story, but the simple version is, I have tons of simple versions. I grew up in a household. My mother was a nurse. My dad was an x-ray tech. My aunt and uncle were OTs. My sister was going to nursing school. So it was like, I wanted to stay in that realm because I grew up in hospitals. I grew up roaming around Mass General Hospital playing with syringes, literally, because my dad, that's where he worked.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, and then I'd hang out. My mother at one time was head of a diet clinic, and I would hang out there all day. So I went to school for occupational therapy, and that's how me and Laurie met, because I worked in, different, subacute centers. But I got to the point where I was like, I feel like anyone could do this. And I didn't like being held down by, number one, a boss, but number two, insurance companies. And that led me to like different educations to certifications, like a step-by-step process. And then going through the Czech Institute and moving through all the certifications and teachings, it really influenced my lifestyle and how I lived. It wasn't like, I just do this job and I come home and I live a different lifestyle. I was like, this is how I live. And this is what I'm teaching people. And that's kind of how me and Jeannie met. And from there, even, it was a step-by-step process to get where we are today. And one thing we always say is, we didn't really find this work and what we do, it found us. And that's the beauty of what we do and why we love it so much.
Yeah, I think that we've always sought the function and really understanding the interconnectedness of the human body. And that was something in my own journey. I came about it in a very personal way. I was on my own journey, kind of seeking something that I had experienced. I had the opportunity to experience my body in a new way and in a new environment. And I was curious about that. I wanted to know more. And during that time, the whole holistic world was coming about. And so I looked into that, but at that time it was a lot of massage and herbs, and that wasn't my jam. I wanted to know more. And that's where Josh was saying, that's where we linked up at the Czech Institute that offered a lot of that insight as it was coming to more of the forefront. But yeah, and here we are. I think it's incredible to be able to look at the body and the wholeness, and with the work we're doing, it really takes us away from having to fix what's wrong with us and really begin to be with our bodies in a different way, and to begin to listen a little bit more than be up in our headspace so much, really teaching people, coming into that awareness and how powerful that can be.
I think that is the hardest part of our business, and it's been for 23 years, but the most beautiful piece. And a good example is this. It's like we always say, everything that happens is a part of your story. The problem is we try to fix it versus embrace it and say, what do I need to, like when you get sick, what do we do in this culture? We pump our body with zinc and echinacea, tons of supplements, or even take medications. The problem is your body is sick and it's telling you something. Of course, we don't want to sit here and you say you shouldn't get sick. But your body is doing, yeah, well, maybe you need to take a break, slow down, or live differently. But at the same time, your body's temperature is going up for a reason, to protect you. And the more we suppress these things and try to fix them, we get in the way of nature. Nature's always going to win.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to move away from that fixed mentality.
So why is it that you guys make the thyroid gland such a big focus?
Our main focus is really about the cell. How are the cells breathing? Do the cells have what they need in order to produce the energy that is like our little internal engines, right? And thyroid hormone is the only hormone, or one of the only hormones, that affects every single cell in the body. So that is where we kind of grabbed onto that niche, because nobody really understood at the time, 17 years ago, when we really started bringing this work into our own practice, what cellular energy production meant, or what we meant by metabolic healing. No one really grasped that concept, but they understood the thyroid.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually interesting you asked this, because our method, we're trying to come up with a new name for it, because it's been a long time. Because we do so much more, we still focus on the cell. Our end goal is the cell. It's just that we don't just focus on thyroid issues, right? But we truly believe there's a relationship between the adrenal, thyroid, and the nervous system and the cell. But we don't want to get caught up in those systems of how do I support my adrenals or how do I support my thyroid, right? What we focus on is like, okay, the science and what's inside the cake is the depth of our work. But as a client or someone that follows us, you don't need to know that. And this is important because I think in our industry and our culture in Western medicine and alternative medicine and on Instagram and social media, everyone's making their health journey complex because everyone's turning into a practitioner, and they're turning their journey into this chemistry experiment, throwing out all these big words. And we don't need to know that. What we need to know is the icing on the cake, the surface. What do I need to do to eat every day, when, how much, etc., to meet my needs? How do I move through the day? How do I come into the day to meet my needs? How do I hydrate? How do I get sunlight to stimulate my circadian rhythm and all my systems and balance that cortisol melatonin relationship so I can sleep? And the list goes on. These are the things that support your cells and that support the depth of the cake. But we don't need to know all the complexity of it, right? And I think that's another thing we're trying to bring to the surface is, like, who cares about the thyroid and the adrenals and all this mumbo jumbo that's out there, the histamine issues? Like, everyone's strangling these things.
I was just saying it's really important as we step into the healing journey to set realistic expectations. And we might say we didn't get into it overnight, but in all reality, we're looking at decades of input into the system that makes a difference in where we are today. So I think that that's really important for people to understand. It's not that you're trying to fix your body. You're trying to create an environment that supports all pieces and parts of who you are and where you come from. That's the more important thing.
And so what would you say to this audience, that why I invited you guys here today to kind of help me navigate for those individuals who are trying to get pregnant or who are already postpartum phase of their life, about supporting their systems? Because a lot of us are running on empty.
I think it comes down to really putting on your oxygen mask first, right? I think we as a culture, again, have been told, women in particular, that we are the nurturers. There's no doubt about that. But again, there is this idea that we have to give up our entire being to be a mom. And I think that is so false and so wrong. But it's easy to jump into, because especially if we have our own stories where we're coming from. And if there's one thing that's going to really bring to light your story, it's being a mother. So it's compounded, right? There's a lot of variables taking place here. But I think for moms, it's stepping into what is it that you really want every single day. When you wake up in the morning, do you have what you need for yourself? Because then and only then can we show up for our children in the way that we need to, right? That's the only way we can do it, is by taking care of ourselves. Otherwise, we'll just drill ourselves into the ground. And I think that that's the most important thing, is to reverse that conversation and say, no, I have to become first. I have to be first in line here. That's the only way I can be there.
There's a question we ask all our clients to ask themselves in our group as well, is what do I need? Because the problem is everyone follows Instagram pros as protocols. They follow books as protocols and individualized treatment programs. And people are doing more and more and more, and they're strangling health. And it's becoming, as I mentioned, so complex. And they're not saying, what do I need? They're just doing all these things. And the problem is it actually creates more stress in the system. They're doing the red light therapy. They're doing the lotions and potions and supplements, right? They're doing the whatever it may be nowadays. There's a million and one things. Instead of sinking in and saying, what makes my soul breathe? What makes me smile? What makes me happy? And a lot of people say, oh my God, like I'm doing all these things that I don't need that are wasting the little energy that I have. What makes me happy is waking up and feeling the sun on my face. What makes me happy is doing yoga, is taking walks, is painting, or whatever it is. And we have to make sure that we can do those things. Now, of course, when you have a baby, it's really challenging. That's why I say there's 3 different levels of what do I need. And the first level is like, you make a list. I can do that anywhere, anytime, right? Like I can just close my eyes for a second and nose breathe. Or if I'm in my office on a call, I could just lay on the ground and just ground myself. Like to me, I do that a lot. Clients don't know it, but I'm laying on the ground on my back, just things that you could do anytime, anywhere. It doesn't matter where you are. The second is you need a little wiggle room, right? Like you need to be able to step away, or I need to walk outside or whatever it may be. And the third is like, you need a little more space and time. Maybe it's mountain biking. Maybe it's going to yoga class. But you need these different levels to always meet your need, because anytime you have a business or you have a family or a loved one or a child, you have to learn how to meet your needs first to harness that energy so you have energy to give. And if you don't do that, beside just food, beside just supplements and labs and what's wrong with us, we need to focus on the good things and what's right with us and how do we meet our needs every single day.
So I love the question, what does your soul need? That is such a deep question. What are typically the responses you get from your clients?
I was just going to say, it's a very, very, very difficult question. I remember the first time actually in biodynamic cranial work that was asked to the class. And it was really interesting for myself, as well as a lot of the people in there, that no one had an answer. No one really knew what they needed because it had never been asked, right? I know in my life that question was never asked. What do I need? So I never had the opportunity to really explore that. So it can take a moment and it can feel a little uncomfortable. But if we keep just kind of settling into that possibility of, oh, wait a second, I do have needs and what can they look like? We will get there.
I remember those 2 things, and this kind of plays off what she was saying. And this is important because you have to remember that your experiences shape your biology. This is how you got here. It's not just about food, and it's not just about supplements and labs. Your experiences from 0 to 20, 30, 40, 50 years old shape your biology. So if you want to do things, if you want to reshape your biology, what do? You have to change your experiences. And it becomes more than just food, which comes into what do I need, right? That begins the shift physiologically that we're looking for.
I'm sorry.
Go for it. Okay. The second thing is, and these go back to the beginning, but it still plays off this. You were saying like people do quick fix diets, and it plays into what we're saying here. I think a lot of people do this because even now when you're tired and you have a baby or a child or you're pregnant or you're postpartum, whatever it is, most of us go into pregnancy in the exact same state, we've been in, you know what I mean? And unfortunately, this is why we see so many pregnancy issues, whether it's preeclampsia or blood sugar issues or high blood pressure and, vomiting. And because we're going into pregnancy in debt. Why? Because we're doing things in our life that allow us to survive. This is why people do the quick fix stuff. They don't realize they're doing it. You go into pregnancy, and what do you need in pregnancy? 2 things, energy and minerals.
Would you agree?
Why? Because the developing fetus sucks them right out of you at the expense of whatever's going to happen to you. And this is why a lot of people have the issues they have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think also, when you're speaking of women who are 5 pregnancies deep, these women are very, very depleted.
100%.
They're so depleted. So it also comes down to the nourishment. How do we begin to replenish these things? Right. So a lot of people, that come to work with us, they have no appetites. They wake up in the morning and they're out the door to take these 5 children to school and get them where they need to go. Right. Where what they need to do is start by first fueling their bodies that are so heavily deficient. And what that looks like is going to be very different for each person, because again, if you come into the day without an appetite, you can't force feed. We're never trying to force feed the body. We're meeting the body where it is at all levels, right? So how do I nourish myself in a way that meets me where I am today? And we start from there.
That's an important point. And you were saying, like, what's the other thing? The other thing is, how do I do things differently? Right? Because you can't, coming into the day is the most important part of the day. It's going to dictate how you end the day, right? So if you're waking up, you're getting shot out of a cannon, you run upstairs to get your kids out of bed, right? You're getting on your phone, you're turning on the TV, you're flipping on the lights, you're grabbing a cup of coffee. Doesn't matter what labs and supplements or how clean you eat. You can't overcome that. You're going to be chasing your physiology all day long till about 4 or 5 o'clock when you finally catch up. But guess what? You got to do it all over again. This is how people create debt, right? And there's a problem with this because, when you're going into the day, you should be in a different state, right? We always try to wake up, even if it's 15 minutes earlier than your son, because our son, he is like on the second he wakes up. When I say on, it's like on like Donkey Kong. Like, I want to do Legos and crafts and this and that and let's go outside. And it is on. So if I wake up and go right into that, right, the chances of me getting mad at him during the day or yelling are high, but it has nothing to do with him. But if we wake up a little earlier, right, and do the things we need to do, whether it's laundry or stepping outside or taking the dog for a walk or taking a shower, we go into it in a different state. Or nothing. We go into, the war zone in a sense, in a beautiful way, in a very different state. We have more resiliency, right? So we can handle everything else much differently. So I think we have to come into the day differently. And this is something we focus on our clients with a lot. Why? Because believe it or not, based on our physiology, this is the most important part of the day. Why? Because, and it goes back to the old saying, like, we should wake up when the sun comes up. Why? Because the sunrise, that type of light, stimulates melanopsin receptors in our eyes, which communicates with a nucleus in your hypothalamus. And this isn't like esoteric. This is science, right? And that regulates the relationship between cortisol and melatonin and more, right? So it'll gradually rise cortisol through the day. So it starts to go up slowly and then peaks around, like, depends what you look at, like 10, 11. And it peaks till about like 3 or 4-ish, and it slowly starts to come down. This is a natural flow, right? And it signals melatonin to go down in the morning to be stored for nighttime. The problem is when we wake up and we don't see the sunlight. How many people see the sunlight? Raise your hand. I saw none of you raise your hand. How many of you actually flip on the lights, go on your phone, TV, or computer? Raise your hand. I saw all of you raise your hand. This is a problem because the light that's being emitted from those things is like 6 to 8 times more of the sun, and it actually jacks up cortisol right away from the second you wake up. And the problem is it doesn't allow you to store melatonin. This is where sleep issues begin, right? And then we don't have to get into UVA rise and UVD rise, but sunlight is one of the best ways to fuel your cells and to begin regulation of your circadian rhythm, your systems, leptin, insulin resistance or balance, thyroid hormones, dopamine.
There's times like I'll come down here to my room and I'll just journal or just do some quick meditation. And I definitely see a difference when I start my mornings in a calm state for myself. The phone actually, for myself, I can feel, again, it's like, it's just like this nervy feeling that I get, like it's just heightened anxiety. So I personally cannot look at my phone first thing in the morning. I've made that
Right.
awareness, because like I would notice like my mood sometimes just kind of changing, and I'm like, what did I do that could lead to this? And of course too, from following a lot of your stuff, I pay attention to those things, and I ask myself those questions, and I just track my own behavior throughout the day. And so there is power in this of making ourselves a priority, and like you said, even if it is for 5-10 minutes in your morning. So I feel that difference for myself.
I think what you just said right now, Lori, is really, I think what you said right now is really important as far as being an observer of self.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of sitting up on the balcony for a few, for a moment here and there throughout the day, and looking down on what is going on in life. I think it's such a powerful thing to do, because we get to see ourselves from a different perspective, and because we're constantly in it, right? We miss those little details and these little shifts that we can make that can create so much power in our energy and just kind of how we're moving through each day. Yeah, I think it's huge. And it's actually something that we have our clients do regularly, is observing ourselves.
Well, this is called creating awareness, right? Most of us are in survival mode. Most of us are numb, and most of us don't know what we need. When we become more aware of what we need over time, we can make the best choices every single day to meet our needs, right? That it all comes together. And it's not going to happen overnight, because we've been taught for so long to not meet our needs and meet everyone else's needs. We live in a codependent society. I mean, it's insane, So the more aware we become, the better choices we can make every day. And we can say, you know what, I'm supposed to work out today, but I missed all my meals because of a meeting, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to go for a walk. Or I'm supposed to work out today, but my child was up all night and I'm just exhausted. I'm just going to do restorative yoga, aka lay on the floor on my back. And there's a million examples we could use, but this is awareness. The problem is everyone has this protocol of how they should live, right? And it's right here. And the problem is when we get tired, or we get sick, or we don't have a lot of energy, or we get pregnant, or we're postpartum, whatever it is, we never dip down to meet that need. We continue to go straight. That is going to create debt, right? Because you surpass where you are. You're expending energy that you don't have. You're not meeting the demands that are placed on your body.
That makes sense.
So by the time we might feel better, now we're already in debt. We have to say, I'm tired, I don't feel good, I'm pregnant, whatever it is. We have to dip down and meet those needs and meet our body where it's at. Because now the energy coming in meets the demands being placed on our system. It's kind of like you go shopping with your credit card, but you don't have the money to pay it off, versus you have money in your bank account, you use your credit card, and you pay it off right away. There's a big difference.
I think number one is fueling first thing in the morning, getting something into your body that has some balance to it, right? We don't lean too heavy towards protein. We don't lean too heavy towards carbs. It's what's the balance that's going to help kind of start that fire, and what is the food that's going to help keep that fire sustained throughout the day, right? And if you want to speak to that a little bit more.
Well, I think it has to be personalized, right? Because let's say you're insulin resistant, or which means maybe you're overweight, or your PCOS law comes under that, or you're type 1 diabetic, or you're chronically stressed and hyperglycemic. Like waking up and having carbs or a lot of carbs is going to work against you. Carbs are not bad, but the system they're going into, I'll say bad, but I don't mean bad. It's dysfunctional. We always say it's like putting $1 in a change machine and getting 50 cents, but you blame the dollar. No, it's the system. It's the change machine. That's the problem. So we always have to personalize it. But I think our culture, our society, and all the diets out there, everyone talks about carbs and everyone talks about vegetables like they're the cat's meow. The problem is no one really talks about protein enough. Now, of course, I'm not talking about like the extremes, carnivore or keto. There is a balance. And it's important because proteins satiate us. They're dense. They create a lot of stability in the body, and they anchor us. Number two, they're loaded with minerals that we need to regulate all enzymatic reactions that support us, not only getting pregnant, but when we're pregnant, so we don't get depleted. We talk about those women that have 5 kids and they get pregnant again and they're depleted. The problem with this is every child the more depleted they come, if they don't know how to restore that, every child becomes that much more depleted. This is why usually the youngest is the sickest or has the most complications, because they didn't get what they needed in the third trimester or downloaded through breastfeeding, which is obviously very important if we can. So protein supply us with those minerals. Yeah, because every time you're pregnant, I mean, there's a lot that's needed between magnesium and minerals and fat soluble vitamins, but there's a reason why your blood volume goes up, right? There's a reason for this. There's a reason that your calorie need goes up, right? And your blood pressure might go up to a certain extent. There's a reason why TSH goes up when you're pregnant and your thyroid enlarges. This is all normal stuff, right? There's a reason your breasts enlarge, right? There's a reason why you gain a little bit of weight in the belly to protect the fetus. This is all normal stuff. The problem is we see it as a problem in our society, right? And it's not a problem. Of course, there's a balance of when it is a problem, you know? But there's a lot that's happening through pregnancy in the cell, because the baby is literally a cell that multiplies, or an embryo. And that's why blood volume goes up. It's to support embryogenesis. But in the third trimester is when the mother downloads tons of minerals, but more so copper to the baby. I should say iron, sorry. I meant iron. And this is important because think about when most women say I'm anemic. It's always the third trimester. But to a certain degree, a lot of the times it's actually normal because you're downloading iron to the baby. But if you go in depleted in retinol and copper, which regulates iron, right, then you're going to start having these problems more and more. The baby's not getting enough copper. And then every child thereafter, they're probably getting no copper. The problem is, you know, these minerals are important because you can't regulate your organs, your systems, your antioxidants, cell energy production, the thyroid, the adrenals, you know, all these different things without these minerals. It's impossible. And this is why we're seeing in this culture, because we're not eating enough protein. We're not eating real food anymore. We're eating packaged, processed, fortified, enriched foods. Of course, people are getting lazier. We're not moving. And you know, we're seeing now, like when we started, we would work with like 40, 50, 6-year-olds. We work with 20-year-olds with autoimmune issues, right? Autoimmune issues are chronic issues. So we're seeing a younger population more depleted now. So our food is, of course, it's more than this, but like Jeannie was saying, it's like, you know, carbs are great. The problem is you can burn them really quickly and we need them. It has to be personalized. But if you look at most people's diets, and we've looked at enough food logs over 23 years to say that most people are protein deficient. People say how much?
Especially women.
Yeah, especially women. It doesn't matter how much. You just need to eat more protein. If you're having 1 egg, eat 2. If you're having 3 ounces, eat 4 ounces.
So I know you guys are big advocates for eating organ meat, and I personally have a really hard time with that. I just remember being a kid and coming in the house and my mom cooking liver and onions for my dad, and just that smell, you know, to this day kind of repulses me. But I know the importance of having organ meats, and so what would be your recommendations for trying to get more of that into our diets?
You get creative.
Yeah.
You get creative, but then there's also other foods, right? You've got your shellfish, your whitefish, your fatty fish. I mean, you get your muscle meats. But, you know, one of the things that we have people do is you can get blends. You can get beef organ blends, and you can even break that down even further. And you know, sometimes we'll tell them to take a quarter of that pound and put it into another pound of meat, right? So that it's really getting hidden in there. Or we'll have people get the organ meats, grind it up, put it in ice cubes, and then just put 1 ice cube per pound of meat and build up on that, because you're still taking that meal and elevating that nutritional value quite significantly just by doing that. And it's also important because people are so deficient. So to go from 0 to 100 overnight is equally as stressful to the system as not having it at all, right?
I think everyone focuses on organ meats like they're the end all, and it's not, right? Because here's the thing: this is why we promote variety. Because if you don't eat a specific food, or you're allergic to a specific food, but you eat a variety of foods, you're still going to get the nutrients, right? You're still going to get retinol, you're still going to get copper, you're still going to get iron, you're still going to get magnesium, potassium, right? But if you just focus on 3 foods and you don't eat a specific food, now you're deficient.
Yeah.
A lot of people can't eat organ meats, right? But again, if you eat white fish, shellfish, fatty fish, eggs, dairy, if you can't have dairy, that's fine. Muscle meats, like Jeannie said, you can easily replace that. And things like white fish, fatty fish, shellfish, and organ meats are power foods. So you don't need a ton of them. A little goes a long way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like Jeannie said, you can get blends of heart, kidney, spleen with ground beef from U.S. Wellness Meats. It's still a little on the mushier side. So I don't mind any of this stuff. But
I do.
She
like
does.
You. I don't like
so
it.
we mix it in with ground beef to create more balance. You can just eat liver pate instead of just a piece of liver on your plate.
Wow.
But another one that's a lot of people forget about because they think organ meats are just liver. This is where everyone goes. I can't eat liver. Well, that's not the only organ. I'm not saying you have to eat spleen or kidney. Some people love it, some people don't. But believe it or not, like heart, sounds crazy, is really good. You just don't have to like put a heart on the grill or in a pot and cook it. You can. But if you grind it up into 3 ounces of heart has enough CoQ10 to last you a week. You can mix it in with your ground beef. I just eat it and it tastes like ground beef. So there's more organ meats than just liver, and there's ways to hide it, and there's different ways to do it. Like I could eat a liver on a plate. It's not my favorite, but I love liver pate, right? So there's different ways to do it. Yeah. You could do chicken hearts, but I was talking more beef heart. It's a big heart. You could just cut it up, put it in the grinder.
No.
More mild organ.
I could eat a bucket of nails. And she agrees. It's like...
Didn't even know it was there.
Yeah.
When we had our child grinding it, he got into it too.
They're like, Al, guess what for dinner tonight? We're having beef heart.
So my next question for the both of you is, as one is working to create balance with everything that we've been talking about throughout this podcast, would you then say, as one then enters perimenopause and menopause, that we should see less hormonal symptoms if we go in with more of a balance prior?
You can definitely manage them through creating more balance and meeting yourself where you are. Absolutely. Because it's what all of our hormones are working off of that negative feedback loop, right? So if we can regulate that, so your adrenals, your thyroid, your gut, your gonads, they're all working off the same negative feedback loop. And that's what we're addressing through how we're living, how we're eating, how we are doing life, and again, managing the effects that our environment have on us in a better way. Right? So if we're doing that, then we can help support those huge fluctuations, because that's what's happening during menopause is the hormones are in such tremendous amount of flux. So the more stability we create through our lifestyle, the less of that fluctuation we're going to get. It's still going to happen, because I believe that, just like Josh was saying with pregnancy, women are going into menopause already very dysregulated. So it's only compounding the issue and the fluctuation that we're experiencing in that phase of life.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think the big issue is that when women get their cycle, it's essentially you need the birth control pill. And when you hit menopause, that means you're going to struggle with symptoms, and it's bad. It's not the case. It's just showing you how you need to change to meet your needs, right? There's a lot of women that don't even have symptoms through menopause, and everyone thinks everyone needs progesterone. This is a big false, right? It's not just about progesterone. Hormones are about ratios in the body and balances, like yin and yang. Right? You'd be like the ocean always coming in and never going out. There'd be a problem. There's a balance there. That's why it never, well, sometimes it does, but it doesn't like take the coast of California or, flow into Boston. So it's a balance. But the more catabolic you become over the years, which, I mean, look at our culture. Unfortunately, we live beyond our means. We work beyond our means. We spend beyond our means. We do everything beyond our means. Right? It's what our culture is all about. The problem is this is why we're seeing disease. This is why we're seeing the things we're seeing and new emerging things. Like when we were in this industry 20 years ago, there's no histamine issues. There's no SIBO. We barely work with people with autoimmune issues and maybe lupus. Now it's everything under the sun and mold. And it's like all we're doing is focusing on what's wrong with us, and no one's saying, what do we need to do to change? You know, the problem is when we live in that state, and anything anabolic is going to drop. And those are like testosterone and progesterone and things like that, because we're always here. We're never coming back to here, right? And when you do that and you live up here, you become depleted. So when you go into menopause, you're going to feel it, because there's such dysregulation in the ratios between your hormones, right? So when women go into menopause, the advice is ask yourself what you need now. How do I eat, live, breathe, move differently to meet this new chapter in my life? Because it has to change. Has to. Second is, when you feel that you're moving in that direction, I would definitely get some labs done just to get a snapshot of where you are hormonally, right? Some women need support and some don't. Your hormones are going to be low, right? It doesn't mean you jack them up. That would be like someone that's 80 years old taking 1,000 milligrams of testosterone a day to bring their testosterone up. Doesn't make any sense, right? You're not 20 years old. The goal is to create balance at your age, right? So it's that ratio between estrogen and progesterone. But it doesn't mean if you take them, it's going to fix everything, right? Because that's not going to fix the debt. That's not going to change the system. How you change and meet these needs and live are going to do that and eat, right? And then from there, you can decide, what do I need? Do I need anything, right? Do I need progesterone? A lot of women need both, actually. We're not like pro estrogen. The problem is everyone thinks it's all about progesterone. And it's not, right? Because too much progesterone can make you lazy, very sleepy. It can make you kind of like apathetic, and kind of like blah all the time when you have too much in relation to estrogen. Estrogen is not a bad hormone, but estrogen in women, this is what, and even in men too, you know, it makes your joints lubricated. It helps with a lot of neurotransmitters in the brain. You know, this is why when a lot of women go into menopause, they get a lot of pain in their body, right? They get vaginal dryness. This is low estrogen. So a lot of women do need a mix of maybe, you know, estrone, estriol, and a dab of estradiol from like Beswick or something. They have, you know, different formulations, but it's not just about progesterone as being this wonder hormone. And then from there, of course, it really comes down to that foundation of what do I need and how do I do things differently? Because that is going to support, either if you're not taking anything, it's going to support you, but if you are, it's going to support it even more.
Yeah, makes total sense. Total sense. I'm going to read you guys a few questions that was sent to me. And let me just find those a quick second here. All right. So two questions here by the same person. What trace minerals are most important? And then are there any brand suggestions?
I would focus on food first. Always food first. Because people are eating chicken, steak, and eggs and taking trace minerals. To me, you're going backwards, right? It's like he who can do the most with the least. And if we get a variety of foods, we essentially don't need trace minerals. You know, if you get the brand, it's like a blue bottle. I think we have the link on our website, eastwesthealing.com. Of course, it has chloride and boron and sodium potassium. But guess what?
Trace minerals.
Right? You can get all that from your food and more. There's so many foods loaded with potassium. We need 4,500 milligrams a day. It is the most important mineral on this planet beside copper. The problem is if you tried your darn hardest to get 45 milligrams from food, and there's a lot of foods with potassium, but we only think bananas and coconut water have potassium. Potatoes are loaded, beans and vegetables and prunes. And I mean, there's hundreds of foods. It's hard, but it's a very important mineral. We can get these things from our food. Once you're doing that, if you feel like you need a little more, then you can add a few drops to your water, right? It's basically, you know, seawater in a sense. So, and it has magnesium too. But I would start with food 100%. Because when we go to the blankie, we're less likely to do the foundational principles because we get comfortable. I can just do the mineral drops, right? I don't have to. The problem is there's no way ever you're going to meet your mineral needs with trace minerals. Not even close. Because the more you take, the higher the chance you're going to get diarrhea, right? And for a lot of people that are really just sensitive, it can cause a lot of bloating. And that's why we always say food first. And we challenge people, right? If you want to change, if you want to create change, you have to change. And this is the challenge, right? So we challenge you to not buy the drops and to focus more on your food.
Wonderful. We kind of covered this, but I'll just repeat the question since it's here. Beef liver
I think that's going
supplements
to go
for
back
everyone.
to what Josh
Pros
was just
and cons.
explaining. We're going to go to food first. They're not wrong. They're not bad. I think they're a great alternative. They're kind of like, in my opinion, more like a multivitamin. So you can use them. I don't think that the dose that most people are taking is right. I think they should be starting off a little bit lower. Maybe start with 1 versus 6 and build up over time. But we're always going to lean into the food first. Bottom line. Always. Try to build it more variety from your proteins. Even if, again, you don't like organ meats, look at what you're doing right now. Build from there with the white fish, the fatty fish, the muscle meats, all the things that we've already mentioned. And then if you want to add it in, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but go slow.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. Best tips for chronic hives that came out of nowhere and haven't gone away after a year.
I would say, of course, it's looking at patterns. It's understanding and saying, okay, it's happening now. What's been going on for the past weeks with how I've eaten, how I've lived, my environment. Maybe it's a seasonal change. It's always about patterns because we know that we become more equipped and say, every year at this time, for some reason, I get hives. So I need to do things differently. It's like every week before my cycle or of my cycle or after my cycle, I feel like hell, right? Well, how do you support yourself that week differently? It's the same thing. The second thing is it's a mast cell response. And a histamine response. So there has to be some trigger, right? So that's the most important thing. The second thing is, yes, you can bring in more mineral-rich foods during this time, especially copper-rich foods, because copper activates the DO enzyme to help you clear histamine. I would say the second thing is when you have a trigger, you can use holy basil and nettle tea together because one acts on the H1 receptor and one acts on histamine. They're like kind of, what's the word? Is prophylactic the right word? As needed tea to support you when you're in that flare. And I would say the last would be during that time, you could, last but not least, if you wanted to, you can either eat thymus or take the supplement thymus. Because again, as well, it works on mast cells.
Fascinating. So my final question for you guys before we close out is, so everything that I've kind of learned along the way, and my nutrition journey actually started with Josh. Back in my 20s when I wasn't feeling well and you were just starting to get into functional medicine, studying it, Josh. And
oh my God,
I wasn't doing well and I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. I don't know if you remember this. And we started just looking at my lifestyle and my patterns, and I was doing way too much cardio. We found out I had food sensitivities. And so anyway, you started me on my path and my journey of just being more aware, paying attention to things. And then, of course, I've always been a fan of yours and I still continue to follow you. And so I have now taken what I've learned. And of course, I teach my kids sometimes like, yes, mom, I ate protein today and all that type of stuff. But what do you do for the kids, right? Because I mean, they're growing, we want to support their systems. There's a lot of picky eaters out of there. And so what do you have any kind of just tips for any of us moms out there that are always trying to just, improve kids eating, just get back to the basics of just even getting them to have just more, not have so much ultra processed food. There's always like this tug of war, right? Of like what they're seeing at school and then maybe how you're living in your house. And so any words of advice along that path?
So it is very challenging to feed our child. But what we do is we do the best that we can do. We give him as much whole food as he will take from us. And then we find the balance with the other things and we get the cleanest versions that we can. I think routine is critical. And I think balance is really important. So he has a very, rhythmic schedule of when he eats. He knows when it's coming. So he's very compliant with when he needs to eat. And And then again, just finding the balance of making sure that he's got proteins, fats, and carbs in his diet.
He doesn't eat horrible. He just doesn't eat a lot of foods because he's so picky. You know what I mean? It's not like he's eating Fruit Loops. He doesn't even eat pizza or hamburgers. He won't touch it. He thinks it's like arsenic.
I would love if he'd eat a piece of pizza.
Oh, you know.
But he won't.
You know, I think the other thing is, like, he doesn't even know what gluten-free, organic, or GMO, any of this stuff is. And I think this is something that our culture has to work out for, because we become so OCD, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because there is a balance. It's like the journey to become healthy should be healthy. It should not become unhealthy. And when we start taking how we feel and what we think about food and the craziness we have around nutrition and we imprint it on our kids, now we're turning it into an unhealthy process. So are there times where he has French fries from, not McDonald's, we've never been there, like
he thinks McDonald's is the M&M store.
Yeah.
Because of the arches.
I mean, like,
so cute.
If we buy ice cream, is it organic and whole? Yeah, of course. But if we're out and someone gives them a Reese Piece, we're gonna be like, no, you can't have it because it's high fructose corn syrup, and you're gonna no, right? We just don't do that, because that's when the fear, the dysfunction, and the unhealthy come in. And the way we live, even ourselves, is like this. If you think of a speedometer like that, right? 0 disease, health 100%, which we don't want to live at 100%. That's annoying. If you're living at, like, let's say 80 or even 90% of your health, not just nutrition, right? You nurture yourself, you nourish yourself, you meet your needs. If you have that Reese's peanut butter cup or that whiskey on a Friday night, or you miss a meal, or you go to eat and it's not organic, you live closer to health. So you're not going to really feel it. It might push you back a notch or two or even 5 or 10, but you're not going to feel it because you're already so far from disease, right? This is what resiliency is. And you live with within a lifestyle where you come back from that dinner of pizza and beer, and the next morning you pick back up with your lifestyle. And that's the balance, right? The problem is too many people living at 20, 30, 40, even 50%. So when they do that, they can feel it even more because they have less resiliency and it creates more debt. So we're not going to sit here and say, like, yeah, we don't take them to, like, horrible places. But if we're out and he's like, Dad, can we get a milkshake and fries? Sure, let's go do it. Like, that's, to me, the experience is 10 times more beneficial physiologically than what that, one little pack of French fries and milkshake. Again, it's not for McDonald's, but that could even do for a system over a lifetime. It's the experience is going to outweigh that.
It's everything that we're striving for in our practice, and it's balance. How do we find balance again?
Yeah.
Right? Versus being on one extreme or the other. Yeah.
We offer him food. And that's it.
Right. Both of you were saying you're seeing more autoimmune issues, right? Now than you did even when you started the practice. Do you think this kind of also goes hand in hand with all these diagnoses that we're seeing with ADHD and AD and the list kind of goes on for what we're seeing with what children are being diagnosed with.
I mean, our kids are coming into a very fast, and they're not ready for it, and they're being exposed to it, and moms and dads are very low capacity. So it's just kind of it's a domino effect, right? Our children are being affected by not only mom and dad are being affected by the world, the kids are being affected by mom and dad. We have to find a little more balance. We have to slow things down. We have to find healthy boundaries of what we're willing to let in and what we're willing to not let in. Like Harrison doesn't get to be on screens very often, right? So we're just trying to limit his exposure as much as possible because we already know that he's already a very hardwired child. So we have to do everything we can to help him learn how to regulate that system. And it starts with us. We have to come in to the days really on our game, or we're not going to be able to assist him. So I think when it comes to ADHD, what you're really seeing is a very sympathetically hardwired system for many, many reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that 100%. I think it's like our culture and our economy, right? Kids are being put in daycare at 6 months old. Your experiences shape your biology. This shapes their nervous system by someone they don't even know. And what's their nervous system like?
Mm-hmm.
This is going to shape their experiences. I'm not saying like to shame mothers that have to do this, because I understand it. Like, how do you live in this day and age? Like, everything is just so damn expensive, and you have to work. So I think that's a piece of it, because now we're seeing so many kids that are dysregulated from the second they're born. I think the second thing on top of what Jeannie said, I think what she said really sums it up. But I think because of we have to work more than ever, people are on their phone and their computers more than ever all the time, no matter where they are. So they're very disconnected from their kids. I'll give you an example. I take Harrison to the jumpy place, like the trampoline park. There's kids everywhere. It's like mayhem, right? And there's the outskirts where all the parents sit around all the different trampolines. I'm literally the only dad out there jumping with him with the socks on, and I look around and every single parent is like this. Every single parent. That's the disconnection, right? I take him to a birthday party on Sunday. It was at a jumpy place. All the parents were sitting at the picnic table, which is, I'm not saying this is bad, but I was out there jumping with the kids and getting sweaty and having fun. Like, this is what children need. They don't need you to make them money. They need the experiences. They need the connection. And I think this is a piece of it, because, we listened to this podcast once, and they said, ADD or ADHD is not an attention deficit disorder. It's a deficit in attention. It's the environment at home, and it's the relationship between the parents, the relationship of the mother with the child and the dad with the child and the mother with the father and the child, that creates the ADHD, which is a hard pill to swallow. But I also think it's yes, it's being on our phones. It's honestly, it's the lack of food. It's lack of getting outside and the lack of light. Just like there's bad foods and dirty foods, there's dirty light. People do not get outside anymore, and this is a big problem.
Just to mention, that podcast is called ADHD is Over, and I think
it's really good.
It's a phenomenal podcast for moms out there and dads who are challenged with some of those issues.
Yeah, wonderful. Is there anything else you two would like to say before we wrap up?
Other than just thank you for having us here. And
I can talk to the two of you forever, that's for sure.
Everything that they can to, be great moms and to raise great children, and be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself and know that the world is not in alignment with that. So you will have to go out and you will have to find resources, and to keep, what's the word I'm looking for? keep rooting for your children, or what's the word? There's a word I'm looking for that I can't find right now. I'm not sure. What's that?
Like advocating.
Advocate, yeah. Be their rocks, like all the things. Yes.
Well, I would like to say for the dads, I'm just kidding, to add to what Jeannie said, for the moms, and the dads, and the brothers and the sisters, and people without kids even, well, I guess with kids, because this is what I'm going to say is, think about what you do for your children. Think about what you think about for your children. You think about how to love them, how to nurture them, to make sure they're seen, heard, held, and acknowledged and responded to. You make sure they have their snacks when they need it. You pack their clothes. You all these things every single day to meet their needs. But guess what? You don't think like that for yourself. And you have to. You have to. And that's how easy it is. You have to say, I have a meeting today. I need to pack my lunch or do whatever I need to do. Just like we do with Harrison, like, we're supposed to go swimming today. Well, honey, I just picked Harrison up and he's on one. There's no way we're going swimming. He got in the car and called me stupid, and we know he's like not in swimming mode. He's in like, let's go home and play with trains and let's just let him be space mode. You have this like awareness for your children that is next level. You need to build that awareness for yourself, because if you do that, you will create health.
Well, I think it's such a huge piece of healing is the self-parenting component. Yeah. We have to begin to do that for ourselves first. Yeah.
Yes. Amen to that. Well, if anybody listening out there would like to have more information about Josh and Jeannie or read more about them, you could take advantage also of their free resources, such as the 10 tips for thyroid health, the mineral method, or the balancing the body budget. You can also find all this information out at eastwesthealing.com. Of course, you can find them on Instagram at RealFoodGangstas. Am I saying that right, Josh? RealFoodGangstas? I don't have an Austin accent like him. And then also, if you want to work with them either in a group or privately with their RTN method, that too can be found at eastwesthealing.com. On April 17th, Josh and Jeannie will be holding their 8-week online RTN group coaching program. You can find this link in my show notes, and you can go there right now to sign up and be placed on their wait list. But Josh and Jeannie, thank you so much for doing this with me. I love you both. Wonderful. I will put a bunch of the stuff that we also talked about in the show notes. Thank you so much. And hopefully we can do this sometime soon. Again, Josh and Jeannie, thank you so much. The information shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and is based on the opinions and experience of Lori, Dorothy, and their guests. The content should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or a treatment. Always seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast. We hope you join us next month, where I will be sharing my personal story of how I have had to navigate the world of neurodiversity for my daughter.